you say?
R&B legend Freddie Jackson just announced he has kidney disease.
The way you do me all night long. Makes love easy, doing it on it.
The hitmaker behind songs like You Are My Lady and Have You Ever Loved Somebody
Darling, when it's right, just love me down from head to toe.
What is just your message to our viewers to get them?
Ooh, girl, I met you on a Friday, baby. Now it's Sunday and it's getting late. I wanna hold you in my arms forever.
What do you want our viewers to know?
Give me that tasty love. But words sometimes get in the way.
Yeah.
It just happened. So now here I am.
You are my lady. Time flies when you're having fun. Wish I could linger, but I gotta run. You're all I'm living for. That's all I ever ask of you.
Freddie Jackson wasn't just a smooth crooner serenading women through your cassette deck. He was an R&B mystery wrapped in silk and side-eye. For years, fans thought they knew him. Romantic ballads, sexy slow jams, always surrounded by glamorous women in his videos. But behind the chart-topping love songs and polished stage presence was a carefully controlled image, one that Freddie protected at all costs. Because if fans knew what was really going on behind the scenes, let's just say his entire career might have looked very different. He never married, never had a public girlfriend, dodged every single question about his sexuality like it was part of his choreography. And when he did address it, his answers were cryptic, philosophical, something about God judging us and never needing to explain himself to his mother. Respectable? Maybe. But evasive? Absolutely. And it wasn't just the fans who noticed. Then there were the whispers, the quiet rivalry with Luther Vandross, the close creative partnerships that sparked more than a few eyebrows, the management deals that took his money and left him creatively boxed in, and that suspiciously fast fall from the top. Just as quickly as he rose, the industry seemed to move on like he never existed. But what if none of that was an accident? What if Freddie Jackson's decline wasn't about changing trends, but about control? What if he was never allowed to fully be himself in the first place? Because here's the thing, Freddie wasn't just hiding a relationship, he was hiding a power struggle, one between the industry, his management, and his own identity, all fighting for control of the same man. And once you start putting the pieces together, the career, the silence, the scandals, it all starts to make sense. Let's talk about what really happened to Freddie Jackson. Freddie Jackson wasn't just a smooth crooner serenading women through your cassette deck. He was an R&B mystery wrapped in silk and side-eye. For years, fans thought they knew him. Romantic ballads, sexy slow jams, always surrounded by glamorous women in his videos. But behind the chart-topping love songs and polished stage presence was a carefully controlled image, one that Freddie protected at all costs. Because if fans knew what was really going on behind the scenes, let's just say his entire career might have looked very different. He never married, never had a public girlfriend, dodged every single question about his sexuality like it was part of his choreography. And when he did address it, his answers were cryptic, philosophical, something about God judging us and never needing to explain himself to his mother. Respectable? Maybe, but evasive. Absolutely. And it wasn't just the fans who noticed. Then there were the whispers, the quiet rivalry with Luther Vandross, the close creative partnerships that sparked more than a few eyebrows, the management deals that took his money and left him creatively boxed in, and that suspiciously fast fall from the top. Just as quickly as he rose, the industry seemed to move on like he never existed. But what if none of that was an accident? What if Freddie Jackson's decline wasn't about changing trends, but about control? What if he was never allowed to fully be himself in the first place? Because here's the thing, Freddie wasn't just hiding a relationship, he was hiding a power struggle, one between the industry, his management, and his own identity, all fighting for control of the same man. And once you start putting the pieces together, the career, the silence, the scandals, it all starts to make sense. Let's talk about what really happened to Freddie Jackson. When Freddie Jackson burst onto the scene in the mid-1880s, he didn't just sing love songs, he embodied them. With that buttery voice and those baby-face looks, he became the soundtrack for every candlelit dinner, slow dance, and late-night radio request. His videos always showed him surrounded by stunning women, softly crooning while they gazed at him like he was R&B royalty. And to most fans, he was. Freddie wasn't just making hits, he was marketed as the ultimate ladies' man. But let's keep it real. That image, it was manufactured. And honestly, kind of obvious in hindsight. Despite all the romantic songs and seductive music videos, Freddie never publicly dated anyone. No tabloid romances, no messy breakups, not even a red carpet moment with a date on his arm. Meanwhile, rumors swirled like perfume. People in the industry whispered that he was private, which, let's be honest, is usually code for something else in showbiz. And here's where it gets interesting. The only women he was ever linked to were Melba Moore and Patti LaBelle, two legendary vocalists he collaborated with, but never confirmed anything beyond friendship. Fans noticed that the chemistry on stage didn't always translate off stage, and over time the questions kept growing louder. Why is the man who made a career singing about love never seen in love? But instead of addressing the speculation, Freddie leaned even harder into the illusion. He doubled down on the romantic persona, giving fans exactly what they wanted. Fantasies. That silky tenor became a shield, hiding the real Freddie behind a wall of perfectly produced ballads. It was clever, it was calculated, and it worked for a while. But once fans started asking questions that couldn't be answered in falsetto, the illusion started to crack. And what came next? That's when things got messy. Let's get one thing straight. Freddie Jackson didn't avoid the spotlight. He just knew exactly where to shine it. While fans thought he was being shy, humble, or just private, the truth is, Freddie was playing chess in an industry that forced most black male artists to play checkers. You think it was a coincidence that he dodged every question about his sexuality with a vague quote about God and his mother? Please. That wasn't awkwardness. That was survival. Back in the 80s and 90s, being openly gay, or even suspected of being gay, could derail your entire career, especially if you were a black male R&B singer whose fan base was largely made up of women. Freddie's brand was romance, intimacy, fantasy. If he had confirmed what people were whispering, labels would have panicked, radio stations might have pulled back, and you better believe the homophobia in the industry would have cut his career off at the knees. So what did he do? He played the long game. In his Unsung interview, when asked point-blank about his sexuality, Freddie gave one of the most cryptic yet calculated answers in R&B history. "I've never had to explain myself to my mother. God will judge us for who we are and what we do." Translation? He said everything and nothing at the same time. That wasn't an accident. That was a man walking a tightrope, balancing truth, public perception, and paycheck protection. And it worked. Sort of. Freddie got to maintain his fan base while keeping the industry guessing. But that silence came at a price. It fed more rumors, more speculation, and ironically, by trying to control the narrative, he gave the public permission to write it for him. His voice made him famous, but his silence made him a mystery. And as you'll see, that mystery only got deeper the more he tried to keep it hidden. Now here's where things stop being mysterious and start getting messy. Freddie Jackson's rise to stardom wasn't just talent and timing. It was backed by Hush Productions, a powerful management and production company run by Melba Moore's then-husband, Charles Huggins. They saw star potential in Freddie early on and positioned him as the next great R&B heartthrob. But behind all the platinum records and Grammy nominations was a business setup that would quietly bleed Freddie dry. Hush wasn't just managing Freddie. They were owning him. Literally, they had him locked into multiple overlapping contracts. One for management, one for production, and another for publishing. And here's the catch. Most artists would have all those roles combined under one deal, or handled by separate entities. But Hush had all three, separately. That means they got a piece of everything. Bookings, songs, royalties, even the creative direction. Freddie didn't just sign his name. He signed away control. Why would he agree to that? Well, like many young artists, especially those without a strong father figure, he craved guidance, and Hush gave him that, but with a price tag. Freddie later admitted he trusted them deeply, not just as business partners, but almost like family. He wanted to be nurtured. Instead, he got manipulated, and you better believe it got personal. Hush ran the show so tightly that even when Freddie became a household name, he had little say in his own career. Song choices, tour decisions, finances, everything had to go through them. So even as he was climbing the charts, he wasn't building wealth or long-term freedom. The spotlight was his, but the strings were being pulled by someone else. By the time he realized the trap, the damage was done. And just like that, the love songs started to feel less romantic and more like cries for help. Because while the world saw a smooth operator, Freddie Jackson was learning what it felt like to be owned by the very machine that made him famous. Let's talk about the elephant in the velvet suit. Freddie Jackson and Luther Vandross, two powerhouse voices, two kings of bedroom R&B, and two men whose careers constantly got compared, whether they liked it or not. Now on the surface, it looked like friendly competition. Both were topping the R&B charts in the 80s. Both had the ladies swooning, and both were known for keeping their personal lives locked tighter than a Capitol Records contract. But underneath that polished professionalism, there was tension. Whether it was real or just industry manufactured, the vibes were there. Freddie once told a story about Luther calling him after Just a Little Bit More knocked Luther's single out of the #1 spot. Luther joked, "Okay, enough of you, buddy." Cute, right? Except the tone behind that joke probably hit different when you're watching the newcomer take over your lane. Fast. And industry execs? Oh, they loved it. Pitting two gay but not gay black balladeers against each other? That's ratings gold. Fans picked sides. Charts got analyzed like sports stats. Freddie was the flashy new kid. Luther was the seasoned veteran. And when you're both dodging questions about your private life, the comparisons get real personal, real fast. But here's what most people missed. While everyone was obsessing over whether they were enemies, the two actually liked each other. They joked about pushing each other in pools at parties. Luther once knocked on Freddie's hotel room door just to wish him luck before the Grammys. They were both living in a world that wasn't built to protect them, but at least they understood each other. Still, the unspoken competition wore them down. Because in the music industry, there's only room for one black male balladeer at the top. And when the powers that be decide which one that is, the other one usually fades quietly into the background. Freddie Jackson didn't just arrive in the music industry, he dominated. From 1985 to 1990, he wasn't just competing on the R&B charts. He was the R&B charts. 10 #1 singles, platinum plaques, Grammy nominations, love songs that became wedding anthems. At one point, Rock Me Tonight and You Are My Lady practically lived on the radio. Women adored him. Labels cashed in. Freddie had officially gone from singing in Harlem churches to eating filet mignon uptown with the stars. But then, just as quickly as he rose, the momentum flatlined. So what happened? The music changed, and the industry left him behind. The early 90s ushered in a new era. New Jack Swing, hip-hop-infused R&B, faster beats, edgier lyrics, younger faces. Suddenly, the industry didn't want soulful. They wanted cool. And Freddie's silky slow jams? They were labeled old-fashioned overnight. Capitol Records, the same label that once rolled out the red carpet, started pressuring him to change everything. His sound, his image, even his wardrobe. They wanted him to dress like the younger guys, move like the younger guys, basically be the younger guys. And Freddie tried. You can see it in his later music videos. The forced fashion shifts, the awkward choreography, the desperate attempts to fit into a mold that never felt like him. His fans noticed, the charm was gone. The authenticity faded. Album sales dropped, and Capitol support dropped faster. Promotion dried up. Freddie became just another name in the label's forgotten pile, buried behind newer, trendier acts with half the talent but twice the marketability. And let's be honest, once the label's done with you, the machine stops, radio stops, press stops, everything stops. Freddie was still Freddie, but without the backing, he was invisible. He had gone from the king of romance to a cautionary tale about what happens when the industry you helped build decides it's time to renovate, and you're no longer part of the blueprint. Here's where Freddie Jackson stopped being subtle and finally said the quiet part out loud. By the late 80s, Freddie had watched something unsettling play out. White artists were suddenly dominating black charts. And not just dabbling, they were winning awards, topping R&B radio, and getting the mainstream love that black artists created the genre for. The one that pushed Freddie over the edge? George Michael. Now don't get it twisted. Freddie never said George wasn't talented, but in his eyes, George was coasting to superstardom by borrowing a sound born in black communities without paying the same dues. And when George Michael started topping the black music charts, Freddie snapped. In a now infamous 1988 Los Angeles Times interview, he said, "George Michael, who does he think he is? We've got to stop him." He later tried to play it off as a joke, but the bitterness was crystal clear. And who could blame him? George Michael, a white man from England, was getting more airplay on urban radio than actual black R&B singers. Freddie felt like he was being pushed out of his own lane, outsung in a style that was practically coded into his DNA. The deeper frustration? Marketability. The industry machine saw George as safer, more universal. Translation: easier to sell to white audiences. Meanwhile, Freddie had to fight for the same stage he helped build, just because his skin tone didn't come with crossover packaging. In his words, soul music wasn't just about sound. It was about lived experience. Growing up in Harlem, eating collard greens, understanding struggle. You couldn't just imitate that. You had to live it. And watching a British pop star get rich off vibes you lived and bled for? That stung. Freddie's outburst wasn't just about charts. It was about erasure. It was about watching black contributions get commodified, rebranded, and repackaged by the same industry that told Freddie to sit down, shut up, and modernize. While George got to do soul on his own terms and get praised for it. This wasn't about rivalry. It was about reality. The bitter truth is, Freddie saw what was happening long before most people were ready to admit it, and he had the guts to say it out loud. By the 2000s, Freddie Jackson wasn't in the spotlight much, and when he did pop up, fans started noticing something off. The voice that once made women weak in the knees, it didn't sound the same. Performances got shakier, notes were missed, and when a clip from his 2024 St. Kitts Festival set went viral, it wasn't for the reasons you'd hope. Fans watched in silence as Freddie struggled to push through Rock Me Tonight. The breath control was gone. The power? Nowhere in sight. One fan wrote, "He needs to just lip sync and save his dignity." Another said, "This is hard to watch." But it wasn't just vocal decline. It was a health scare unfolding in real time. Months later, Freddie came forward with the truth. He had been diagnosed with kidney disease. At 68 years old, his body was starting to catch up to a life spent on the road, in the studio, and under stress. And suddenly, those long absences from music made sense. He wasn't just stepping back from the spotlight. He was trying to survive outside of it. Freddie admitted he had ignored doctors' visits, believing he was too strong to get sick. But the wake-up call hit hard. In a reflective social media post, he said, "Not me. I'm Mr. Rock Me Tonight." To which his doctor reportedly replied, "You're being rocked and don't even know it." That line? Brutal, but real. He's since partnered with the National Kidney Foundation to raise awareness and use his platform for something bigger than music. And while some fans are still adjusting to the reality of their idol's voice not being what it once was, others are rallying behind him, not just as a performer, but as a survivor. Because even though the high notes have faded, Freddie Jackson is still standing. And honestly, that's more powerful than any chart-topping single. Freddie Jackson may have been pushed out of the spotlight, but he was never fully erased. While his name stopped trending, his songs never stopped playing. And let's be honest, you still can't walk into a grown folks function without hearing "You Are My Lady" or "Rock Me Tonight." The man didn't just make hits, he made memories. His music lives in weddings, cookouts, slow jams playlists, and the hearts of anyone who grew up in that golden R&B era. But behind the nostalgic glow is a story of quiet reinvention. After breaking ties with Hush Productions in the late 90s, Freddie finally took control of his career, albeit with way less fanfare. He dropped a string of independent albums throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Life After 30, Personal Reflections, Transitions, For You, and Love Signals. These projects didn't chart, but they weren't meant to. They were therapy. They were freedom. They were the sound of an artist finally making music for himself. He also focused on something he never had time for in his prime: his health. In 2015, he lost over 100 pounds after a doctor warned him he was headed down a dangerous path. He changed his diet, changed his mindset, and started preaching wellness just as passionately as he once preached love. Financially, his net worth is estimated around $3 million. Not bad for someone the industry quietly tried to phase out. But also, let's be real, nowhere near what he should have had, considering the millions his music generated. Between exploitative contracts, mismanagement, and a fickle industry that moved on without him, Freddie walked away with dignity, but not necessarily the bag he earned. Still, what he kept was even more valuable: peace. Freddie today is unbothered, reflective, and surprisingly optimistic. He shares updates with fans on social media, speaks openly about his health battles, and continues to perform when he can, even if it's not like it used to be. Because now, he's not chasing the charts, he's just living. And maybe that's the real legacy. A man who survived the machine, walked away with his soul intact, and found himself again, even after the applause faded. So the question isn't just what happened to Freddie Jackson, it's why it happened. Was he pushed out because the industry didn't know what to do with a sensitive, soulful, possibly queer black man in an era obsessed with image? Or did Freddie finally get tired of playing a role the world expected from him? The lover, the heartthrob, the mystery? Because when the music slowed down and the spotlight dimmed, what was left wasn't a scandal. It was a man who chose to live on his own terms. He didn't give the world every answer. And maybe that was the point. He gave us love songs, he gave us emotion, and behind the rumors, the contracts, and the fading falsetto, he gave us himself, just not in the way we thought. Freddie Jackson didn't disappear, he just stopped performing.